So Janna Kaplan is rounding out the first half. Give it up for Janna Kaplan, and then a short story by Bill.
So my brother Boris, he is 1 year older than me, and he was born, or got right after he was born, the asthma, bronchial asthma, which in Russia at that time was 1952, was considered a fatal childhood illness. So there was no treatment, nor was there any attempt of treatment by doctors. So they were telling my mother, Mrs. Lippman, don't take care of him, he's going to die anyway, you know, plan your resources. Well, he didn't die because mother did everything she could and took all the family money and spent it on black market for drugs to keep him alive. And specifically, every night he'd have his asthma attacks, and the drug that was used was ephedrine that would open up the lung passages, and she had this rubber pumping thing connected to elaborate tiny little tubes of glass that would create a spray, a focus spray that she would pump into his mouth at night. Usually his asthma attacks were at night. In any case, I was born a year later, and that didn't matter because all family resources were dedicated to keep him alive. And she really believed that he's just like a messiah or whatever. So everybody else just needs to be sacrificed, but he has to live. And he did. Was a very handsome guy, brilliant, really, physicist in graduate school at the University of Leningrad, where I was also at the University of Leningrad, and I finished and worked as a scientist in neurophysiology. And yet that mentality that our lives don't matter and need to be somehow sacrificed to preserve his was just ingrained. And I didn't have to think about it, it was just obvious. So my brother was the first in our family to really discover Jewish underground and Jewish cultural movement that was brewing in Leningrad at that time. And so in 1979, he applied for an exit visa, and he was never connected with any classified research like me or anything really. So everybody expected that he'd get his exit visa and leave without any problem, and relations with the West were pretty good at that time. So there was Carter, detente, SALT II negotiations, so it was pretty good. A lot of Jews were leaving that year. My brother, being an asthma patient, was always exempt from any physical exercise, any gym, anything physical. He missed a lot of school. At the university gave exemption from military draft. But the boys, male students, had to take reservist classes, which he could have gotten an exemption, but it kind of gave them Mondays off, and it didn't have to do anything, just go to some lectures. So he never obtained that exemption, but the exemption really lasted past university, so they weren't really drafted. They had to just go to some meetings of the reservists. He was already in graduate school when he applied for his exit visa. That was about April of 1979, and we did expect that come October he'd probably get his visa and leave. And then at the very end of September, he got his conscription papers. He got the draft papers. And by the Soviet law at that time, any exemption or draft supersedes anything else. Any commitment somebody else has to you, you have to something, any exemption, whatever. You get the papers, everything else is off, and you have to report. And knowing his physical condition and his being expecting the visa to leave, which is kind of already persona non grata, it was obvious to all of us that that's pretty much a death sentence for him. He wouldn't survive a day of military service. He physically would not survive it. And so my brother knew that in my work in neurophysiology, I worked with bats. I studied animal sonar systems in bats and dolphins. And one of the substances I used in my electrophysiology work was acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, and it's a neuroinhibitor. And we knew that he said that I should give him some to induce an asthma attack during the medical board at the conscription site. And I was afraid to do that, because what if he overdoses? I had no idea what kind of doses. I had no idea what and how to administer it. He's never used it before. And yet he put tremendous pressure on me to give him the substance. And we had 2 weeks, so I ordered mice from the distributor of the lab animals and started experimenting on mice with this neurotransmitter to induce asthma attacks in mice and see if then ephedrine would take it off. I killed several mice, but 3 mice lived, and I then put rat traps and got some rats. The lab was infested with rats anyway. And 2 rats I got, and I practiced on rats. I didn't care if I killed the rats, you know. But I needed to establish the doses that would create an asthma attack, and then in such a way that it wouldn't kill them, but the ephedrine would take it down. And then I put traps and got some stray cats and practiced on them. Now, once I got the dosages, I recalculated it to my brother's weight and then divided it by half and gave it to him. And then I prayed, and I didn't know if I'll see him again. So he went to the board, the medical board, and I let the cats out. Rats died, and I had still 3 mice who were in my cage. I didn't know what to do with them because I can't just let them out. I don't know. In any case, my brother did induce an asthma attack at the medical board, and it was pretty severe. But he survived it, and he did get an exemption. And then he called me after he brought himself to some functional state and told me that we are past that. And I felt that I should feel some joy that we saved his life, and he did get his visa, incidentally, 2 weeks later, and left. But I, to this day, feel the shivers of that. But I also remember that as much as I was probably in my natural progression, planning to eventually also emigrate because Russia was a dead end, but I think it was at that moment when I thought quite clearly that if this is what Mother Russia does to her people, I'd rather be an orphan.
I'm okay with the fact that you've killed rats, just want to say. And I am totally convinced that if I had been born in Russia, I would have been a scientist. but I wasn't. And that's okay.